Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. There's a huge phenomenon going on in the internet where people are asking each other, is there an internal monologue in your head? And some people have an actual voice in their head, and some people just don't. And it's blowing people's minds. Just like how is the dress yellow or white, or I believe blue or purple or black? It just made people be like, what? Your perception is different than mine? How is it? We live in the same reality. So we're here today to discuss the phenomenon that happens inside our heads that we never really get to know, but today we get to chat about it. And so Wendy inspired this panel because she was wondering how people experience an inner monologue. Some people think that it's linked to type and others don't. There might be some loose correlation to type, but there's no one-to-one because I don't actually have an inner monologue, and Wendy doesn't have an inner monologue either. But I know some INFJs who actually do have an inner monologue.
We need two new members, and that's nice to see you guys. I'll take over from here. Who's gonna fill in for you?
Oh yeah, who's gonna fill in for our inner monologues? Yeah, we're not. It's just there's no staff there. That's why we're so we have efficient minds. I'm kidding.
Whoa!
We're just gonna start
Shiv
fighting.
will disagree. He's super, but we'll find out.
I'm just joking, guys. Shiv has the true efficient mind because he's the ENTJ, and he actually does have an inner monologue. Surprise. So that's going to be fun to talk about. Wendy actually sent me an article, and it goes over some of the findings within an internal monologue.
I believe the article was about people with inner monologues versus people without inner monologues and how they perform various activities and see how they differ. I don't remember what the results were, but I do remember it's interesting. Bigger picture.
Then let's definitely dive into it today. And so, Wendy, would you like to share a little bit about you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Wendy. I've been typed as ISFP by Joyce, and I don't remember the other person's name. I'm sorry. I have been just finding my journey in life, and I got involved with type because I think that I was trying to figure out how to improve myself after having gone through a few big personal changes in my life. I just thought there's a lot I don't know about other people as well as myself, and I feel like through type, I learned a lot about how to understand people whose the way they think and act, why it's different from my perception of how I should think and act. So it's been an interesting journey.
Absolutely. I could see how it's revolutionary to see that our inner mind's dialogue is different, or lack thereof. And so I did a type clarification session with Wendy many years ago. She's had a chance to really dive into ISFP, and it fits her like a glove. So she's certain it's her best fit type. And so pleasure to have you on today. And Shiv, I'll have you introduce yourself.
All right. Thanks, Joyce. Hey, everyone. I'm Shiv. I'm an ENTJ, typed at multiple places. Everyone lands on ENTJ, so let's roll with that. I got into typology because it helped me develop a better understanding of how to interact with people, how I can help them, what I can expect from them, what are some things that they're good at, and so on. Now, my type, I don't have a fun fact about myself, but I did think of a quote before I joined. The ENTJ type is associated with power, so everyone thinks we're power-hungry egomaniacs. I am not one of those. I do believe power is best used to empower those who don't have it. So that's my quote for the day, and everything after here will be very personal stuff.
Yeah. Shiv is a really likable ENTJ. He's been on a journey of making friends. So everyone on this panel, except for Wendy, is actually a part of Boris's meetup group, and it's in a way we're Shiv's friends as well. So
not in a way, wholeheartedly.
Yep, all the way.
Cool. And Joseph?
Hello. So I'm Joseph. I have been typed by a number of people in this group as an INFP, but the in-person group that Boris runs, for clarification. And I the more I've read about it, it kind of sticks with me. I never got too into Myers-Briggs as a as a method, but my main exposure is through talking to people at the group. But I found it to be kind of interesting, and I found it's an interesting way of looking at how I am in relation to other people, and it's a way of thinking about that. I do think after thinking about it through, I do feel like INFP is the best fit, but I'm always questioning it. Like I find I'm an ever-changing person, and it's been interesting to notice over the years how much my personality shifted.
Yeah. In true INFP fashion, he doubts his own type, which INFPs are known for doing.
Okay,
So
there you go.
he was a part of Boris's group, and then Boris was like, "Oh man, you're so INFP."
Yeah,
So that is the story.
But the initial thing was when he first came to us, he had been typed INTP, and except for the FITI bend, there's some similarity, even though they're totally different, right? So it's a very personal journey, whatever he identifies with. I do believe INFP, to my often flawed assessment, is probably a good fit. But again, Joseph decides. Tomorrow he can be ENTJ and will say, whatever you say, Joseph.
Yeah, and by typed, they mean online quizzes. So, like, on an online quiz, most people get a slightly off type, and so it's common. All right, cool. And Boris.
Yeah, I mean, you've told everything about me now. I'm a code writing cyber nerd by day. I thought MBTI was bullshit till I fell into the group I'm currently running, thinking, hey, this is kind of cool. We had a common and shared connection. Everybody's welcome in our group. And now it's kind of my main hub for social connection. And I meet all these lovely people and enjoy being part of panels. And now for me, MBTI has become sort of a tool and vocabulary to understand self and others, and to actually improve interactions with them by understanding them in their own frame of mind. It's not dogmatic for me. I don't see somebody's type and then have all these assumptions. They're just like cues that might give you tendencies for how to best get along with them, understand them, give them what they need, and reduce friction in a social sense.
Makes sense. So Carl Jung described type as useful metaphors for ways of thinking. And so, I think it's totally helpful as vocabulary for human beings. All right. And so, hi, everyone. My name is Joyce. I'm a certified MBTI master practitioner, and I facilitate the instrument in organizations. I also coach people, and I help people on the discovery process of figuring out their best fit type. And so in our monologues, today we are here to discuss how you experience them and just to compare and contrast experiences to learn more. I actually might want to put the spotlight on Wendy a little bit for now, just because it's something that she's interested in and you do know a lot about it. Would you like to just start with your initial thoughts on internal monologue, how you experience it, and yeah.
Sure. With internal monologues, it was really so I'm part of an MBTI typology group. I'm sorry for the feedback if there's any. For the typology group I'm in, somebody sent some videos on inner monologues and thought it was very interesting. So I watched those videos. I did read about internal monologues before, but I didn't really think much about it until it was mentioned in a discussion in my group. And I was kind of surprised to see somebody with an internal monologue interviewing somebody who didn't have an internal monologue. And he was just like mind blown all the time with her responses of not having an internal monologue. And in my point of view, I'm just like, I don't know why you're mind blown. For me, I'm mind blown that you have an internal monologue. So so that's when I started really thinking about how I think about things and paying attention to how my thoughts form. And I really do think I don't have, from what I've researched, it seemed like people who do have internal monologues hear most of the time they hear their own voice narrating their thoughts kind of. I don't have that. My thoughts come in the shape of like images, sounds, memories, concepts, they can be abstract. Like thoughts to me are abstract. Like for example, in comic books where they have characters walking around and they may have thought bubbles of their thoughts. I thought I didn't know thought bubbles are how some people actually thought. I thought it was just a visual representation of thoughts. I thought everybody else thought like me, which is in concepts and images and words sometimes. So that's where I started really exploring this.
Yeah, because I was thinking the extent of an internal monologue happens for you in the form of like the same for me, which is more if it's like negative feedback, like, ooh, I messed that up. Like I might have a slight moment of verbal feedback in my head. But when it comes to everyday activities or just thinking in internal monologues, that doesn't really happen. It's more concepts and images. Like I'm the same as you, Wendy, in that arena, actually. Everyone else here actually does have an internal monologue, so I'm curious about how their experience differs. Where does everyone's internal monologue pop up? Or like, how is it like to have an internal monologue?
I experience it in different ways. In some ways, it's like a gut instinct kind of thing where it's an inner voice saying, don't do this or go for that. So it makes decisions for me sometimes. And I learned the hard way to trust my gut and go with what it tells me. But it has saved me on multiple occasions from saving money to literally saving my life. So it is something I'm thankful for. I'm kind of like Wendy in the sense that I do think in mostly pictures and flowcharts and stuff. So everything is like a high level system in my head. And as for the connections between the individual pieces and what the whole thing means, that's where my inner monologue also comes up. But in those cases, I kind of have to, it's more of an active monologue in the sense I have to think about it and I call upon it intentionally. It does have a dark side to it as well. So sometimes I would have like when I'm in an FI grip or something, I would have some intrusive thoughts which have no rational basis, but it's like, this is what I'm feeling. And then it's like an inner critic kind of thing. Um, in my conversations with other ENTJs, it has come up that they have this inner voice which tries to like bring them down. And then it takes a lot of energy to kind of shut it up and resist it and like not give into negative emotion and get paralyzed by it. And I also, when I go out into the world and interact with it, because I'm an extrovert, I often have a lot of observations about it, a lot of things, and then drawing connections to other stuff. So that actually helps me come up with a lot of jokes. So one thing my family and close friends have noticed about me is that like I would be sitting on a bus and looking outside and then randomly start laughing because I thought of a joke, and it was because I heard it coming from my own inner voice. I laughed at it as a response. And so it's kind of surprising for people, like everyone's sitting quietly in a bus and suddenly one person just bursts out laughing. But yeah, it's also something like because I'm an extrovert and I think that inner monologue thing is more related to my introverted feeling and introverted intuition functions. And one of those is my inferior function, which is something I'm kind of disconnected to. I observe that for me to fully engage with that monologue, I have to keep deliberately observing it and writing down things that I have learned about it, which is actually what I was doing when I was hearing Wendy talk about her inner monologue. So I think I might have more to add as our conversation progresses, but I guess that's what I have for now.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, Shiv, if people who do have an internal monologue are a little wittier, so they tend to be quicker with speaking or quicker jokes. How about you, Joseph and Boris?
I've been thinking, we talked about monologue, and this whole time I've been monologuing, like, okay, what am I going to say? What am I going to do here? All right, they want me to talk about something. I have to talk about this. I'm not prepared. I just have a busy day earlier today. So those are all the thoughts that are going on in my head right now, and I kind of find it is. I mean, like I think you guys, and then probably most people, I do also think in concepts. Like it's not a purely auditory thing, but it does. The bulk of it is thought. Like language. Like it's in English. Like I think in English. It's English language. It's going through my head. If I'm going through my day, I'm focusing on what like my mind is occupied with the audio visuals of what's going on. But then in the background, almost like there's a podcast playing in the background, but instead it's my head and it's kind of going, but it's like a one person podcast that's going through ideas and trying to like, and occasionally they'll take different tones. Like they'll all have arguments with myself. Like I'll imagine, I'll have an imagined conversation with some other person. I'm sure a lot of people done it. I actually be curious for Joyce and Wendy if you find yourself doing that, or how often you do, if you do. But I myself, like, there's that classic shower arguments where you're like, you have a shower and you leave, you're like, oh man, I just destroyed my fictional opponent. The vision of my opponent's ideas in my head could not stand up for my genius. So that's what I'm doing a lot, or I'm like arguing with myself over what is the right path to do. What is the I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to eat something healthy or grab pizza again. Like that's the choice, and I'm going back and forth. I'm like, okay, what are the pros and cons? And I'm trying to have this kind of discussion with myself. And it's like there's the lazy part that just wants to eat a tasty pizza, and then there's like the rational part of myself is saying, hey, we should make something healthy at home. Like those are the two thoughts going on. And I find that I will find myself, certain parts of my consciousness will take different sides and have arguments with each other. And that's how a lot of my decision-making process works.
Interesting. I might have some questions later to see if there's a difference between Joseph and Shiv, but the way I experience it, it's almost like, I'm ENTP, so NE is my first function. I spend a lot of time in sort of a conceptual silence where things that could be or might be float around. But for me to sort of have a sense of time or progression, or to make progress along something, it's almost like TI needs to kick in, fish stuff out of NE space or from SI, and then articulate it. So for something to be fully, I might be conscious of something in a sort of imagery type of way, but to give it a concreteness, I do need precise language. And so I almost feel like I do that to, let's say, Shiv is an ENTJ, he has TE. I can be really productive in getting things done, but I need to get into the mental articulation mode where I'm saying, okay, what do I want to achieve? What's my time frame? I ask myself questions, and then the moment I can articulate things, it's fairly complicated sentences. It's really expressions of how I feel, but it's sort of pulling out of the fuzziness of NE space specific things that have relevance to my current scope of what I want to get done, or if I'm faced with a problem or somebody discusses something with me, it's almost like I have to narrate it as if I'm holding a lecture almost to myself to articulate it and progress. Because if I don't articulate stuff, I can be stuck in happy Annie limbo. But if I need to get shit done, I'm like, okay, hold on, let me write this down. There's often an okay, a snap. Okay, we go to this, jot it down. And then it helps me to get a sense of time and to get things done, and to also have an explicit, well-defined understanding. Otherwise, I can just sit in NE space forever. Like, I don't know how that works for Shiv. I would be curious because he's super productive by nature. For me to be productive, I believe it's TI that needs to articulate it. And I actually speak in fairly complex sentences to myself or narrate something. It's almost like a narration. Okay, I need to do this. Hold on, wait a second. Pull this in here. Okay, yeah, that works. It's really like I'm talking to a third party. This is the words I would choose, right? I'm curious how others feel.
Yeah, and I think that Joseph has also narrated that his experience inside it is like talking to a third party as well.
Mm-hmm.
Although I find for INFPs and ENFPs, they might have even the most active inner monologue if they do have an inner monologue, because ENFPs and INFPs will have full discussions with other people because they have the SI concrete image of the other person, and they're like FI interacting with that person. But the NETE, like, it can be less precise than how Boris's inner monologue is like. And so it can be even more rapid in a sense. Like, I've had ENFPs just talk to me and say, I've had a whole conversation with you in my mind many times. And I know, like, it's almost like I know your opinion on this topic now because I've talked to you actually in my head a lot. So it's like a relational, people-oriented inner monologue in a way. But yeah, Shiv, you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to Boris firstly, thank you for your faith in my productivity. So with me, I often have these bouts of, oh, how do I want to tackle something? And then my inner voice will just go off, except it's not really in words or languages per se. It's mostly in terms of some concept. And if I have people who are asking me exactly what I'm kind of thinking, it's thinking so fast that trying to put it into human words and then explain it to someone often takes me a lot of time. So I'm sometimes inclined to say I'll just do it and show you or something like that. So it's more of a conceptual, action-oriented inner monologue. It's like a set of computer programs going off in my head, and I need to execute it instead of convert it into a human understandable format that can be explained to people. So I find that it helps me to kind of create analogies with certain things, and I can then use that to explain it to people as compared to the original thought itself. It also kind of inspires me, like, because I always think in that visual diagrammatic way and then use that monologue to connect the pictures. I do sometimes find myself writing down things when I have a lot to take care of, like I have a bunch of tasks and I want to prioritize it. I will put it on paper because I cannot keep too many things in my head. I like putting everything out there, and it does give me the sense of, oh, now it's official, now we're working on it. um, I guess that's how it kind of helps me think fast, if that makes sense. And another experience I've had with the inner monologue is sometimes trying to predict and emulate heated conversations that I might have with others. Like something happened in my life, or I can foresee someone's specific traits eventually affecting me in some manner. And so in my head, I would have a very heated imaginary conversation with that person and exactly what our exchange is going to be, except it never actually materializes because I try to not let things get heated to that point, if that answers your question.
I find it interesting because it's qualitatively slightly different, because I sort of get that NE stuff in concepts, but it's almost like a funnel. I'm attributing it to TI. I could be wrong there, Joyce, but then it's super precise. It doesn't have to be. I can move in the spectrum of fuzziness to detail, but if I want to progress on a task, I like to sort of almost like write an abstract of what I pulled out of the ether, which is good enough for my current scope. I think use is slightly different. I could be wrong. That surprises me a little bit. And but in regards to like Joseph, I wonder, we have both NE, you have FI and T. I have TI domineering. For me, very few of the things I articulate have a lot of emotional content. I wonder if for you it's more, and this is not to stereotype, just to explore, whether they have more value judgments that relate to how you feel about something versus an abstract summary of something. I wonder if there's a difference there or if it's similar.
That's an interesting point. I have to get more. I want to know more about what kind, like more examples of what you, but I think you are right that I think they are probably, for me, they're a lot more emotional, or carry at least value judgments with it. But I'm like, what would be an example?
For me, it's the absence of something, because when I have TI, I feel like I'm not saying I'm holding lectures, but I can very quickly talk a lot, but sometimes fairly precisely about a topic. So when, for example, let's say I have to make some decisions, I have tight deadlines, which I do right now. I really talk to myself, like, okay, what are the things I need to do? Okay, Then I intuit a little bit, and I'm saying, okay, I think I'm going to prioritize them as follows. I'm going to jot something down. It's very little of me necessarily involved in that. There's very few emotional attachments, statistically speaking. Right. So I rarely say, oh, that was stupid, or, oh, yeah, that was awesome. Like I have these statements, but they're sort of fairly rare compared to just analyzing something and moving towards a goal. Right. And my hunch is you might more say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, hey, this is something that's good for me. Oh, why did I do that? Hey, this really makes me feel good. Like I rarely have statements that have the word feel in it when I'm in that mode. And I wonder if that's different for you.
No, that's very much different. And I think part of that is, it could be my type. Part of that also is my background in a creative field. I find
Mhm.
I went to art school in high school, and then I went to OCAD for a bit, and then I studied interior design after that. But they're all creative fields, and they
And you
require
graduated recently, so if anybody's watching, you're the guy to hire.
So this is me in my kind of postgraduate stupor right now. That's where I'm at in life. But there's a lot of decisions you're making when you're designing things, whether it's a graphic or a room or a painting. You're making a lot of decisions, and they're not very rational decisions. I mean, ultimately you're trying to recreate something, so there's a rationality there. But what color do I use in this situation? If I'm not trying to capture reality 100% as it is, which you're generally not, you're trying to interpret reality in a certain way. What do I do? And the decisions are very emotional. It's what feels right. You could try and say oh, actually this, and when you study theory, you kind of learn which colors, create which emotions, and which colors work well together, and how to make a good cohesive color scheme. But ultimately, the final decision, you can use those tools to help guide you, but ultimately you're forging your own path, and it's entirely based on instinct. And that instinct, of course, it's developed over time, but it's a very emotional process for me, I find. And it's like, oh, this doesn't feel right. This feels right. Okay, this feels right. Oh, this is starting to look right. Okay, and then you kind of build up onto each other. And that's how a lot of my decisions in life are made, much to my detriment a lot of the time. Like it's a very difficult way to have feelings to dictate your life, because it's very arbitrary. You can't rely on your feelings. So for me, I have to rely on routine a lot. Like there's routine and structure that kind of takes the feeling out of it. And it's just I want to do what's set before me, so I'll do that. Or I can plan ahead when I'm feeling particularly rational and make a plan. But for a lot of things in life are very emotional, and I wonder if that's how common that is for other people. I would think that it's probably, if people were honest with themselves, probably most of their decisions are based on emotion. But I'm curious to see to what extent that is in other people.
So, to the emotion part, I think some of the most long-term decisions I've had to make, like what do I want to do with my life, what my next goal should be, they have actually been, I would say, guided by emotion. Like when I was a teenager, a relative of mine told me career is something you do to make money, and then whatever free time you have, you use the money to do what you actually enjoy. And that made me very sad. So at that very point, I started deciding, okay, I want to have a life where I enjoy my job. And so, what are the things I enjoy, and what are the things that can turn into a job? So, I did use a very logical, like filtering method of what are the things I enjoy, what can turn into a job, and like a lot of T and I predicting future paths, possibilities, and viabilities and stuff. But it was governed by feelings. And even now, when I think like, what do I want to do next in life, it is governed by how I would want to feel. But the action items and the milestones and everything, that's put in place by the rational portion of my brain.
Yeah, so it seems like we're all human beings, so we all have emotions. And some sources say that human beings are irrational decision makers, and so we are very much governed by feeling first and foremost. What it seems like is Joseph is more aware of it on a day-to-day level, where he can almost consider it consciously, and it's something that is thought about. Whereas for Shiv, he tends to incorporate conscious or very deliberate emotional consideration when it's on a more long-term scope. But on a day-to-day basis, it usually requires more effort to get into that mode. It's not your default in a sense. So I'm curious about Wendy. I know that there's a lot of extroverted intuition in the panel, so they might take up a lot of the talking space. And so I wanted to call on the ISFP to make sure you have a chance to speak.
Yeah, no problem. I thought it was all very interesting stuff that I didn't really think about as much. I do feel like my life I haven't thought about it too much, but I do, if something doesn't feel right to me, I don't do it. For my job, I'm in a field that's pretty technical and very detail oriented. It's in engineering.
What
But
type? I'm just curious what type, because Shiv and I are engineers, so I mean, or by background, I'm just curious what.
It's application engineering, which is very vague. But I look at customer site conditions, and I quote according to what site conditions they have, such as what is their voltage, do they have enough space for our equipment, how does it fit through, and like in real life, if we were to send a technician out there, like would it actually work? So stuff like that. I honestly don't feel like I know that much about engineering, but I do enough. They allow me to play with money too. I think that's a problem, but somehow it's worked out so far.
Their problem or yours?
Maybe both. I don't like playing with money. I can't even manage money in my own life. But yeah, so for something like that, I do it. It's not like I love it. I'm in my current job, and I've talked to Joyce about it and my job journey issues, but I need to like what I'm doing. I don't particularly like what I'm doing, but I love the people. But bringing it back, I don't know if I'm rambling or not. But I want to go back to something that Shiv and Joyce had mentioned about the wittiness. I do want to make a comment about that. So that triggered a memory about the article. So in the article that I sent to Joyce, it did talk about how there's an activity. For example, if they give the participants an activity, those with an inner monologue and those without, they would say, okay, we're giving you these two words. Do they sound the same? And it seems like people without an inner monologue have to say it out loud to hear it. And then people with an inner monologue can figure it out a lot faster, and those without take longer to do it because they have to go through a process of, oh, I have to say it out loud, or struggle to somehow make it like something that they can hear in order to determine, like the homonyms. If I just look at the words, I can't tell, and I can't really say it in my head. I have to mouth it out loud. And so that's one of the activities that was mentioned in that article that I sent to Joyce. And it ties into the witty part. I'm not that witty at all. I feel like it takes forever for me to voice my thoughts because I have to really think about it and then translate it into something that people can hear. And I feel like that's the same in my head. For people to have like a voice in their head going, that takes a lot of effort for me. I have to, like, the other people on the panel talked about having a lot of thoughts and kind of like anxious behavior in a little bit. And that triggered something that I remember from one of the videos I watched about somebody with an inner monologue asking, well, life must be nice, not really having these thoughts going through your head. And I think that's false. I think people without inner monologues do have thoughts. It's just not in the form of like voices. Like, for example, I have anxiety. I'm diagnosed with anxiety. I take medication for it. I do have a lot of thoughts. It's just that my thoughts are not in voices. They're more like a jumble of images and concepts. And it's really hard for me to organize the thoughts. And similar to how Boris was saying that he needed to, in order to figure out like a path towards a goal, if things are too chaotic, he needs to voice out, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that. I feel like in order to do anything in life or to focus on anything in life, I have to really force myself to do that. Otherwise, I don't think I can really plan or make plans. I have to write down someplace, or I have to say it out loud to myself over and over. Somebody, I think Joseph mentioned about the shower thoughts and having arguments. I actually do have that as well. It's just not like voices against each other. It's more like memories of what other people have said. Like, for example, my mom, because she's very critical, I would hear her saying things to me, and then I get a reaction back. Shower is one of the worst times for me to be in because I have all these anxious, like, replaying of memories, like videos in my head that I can't stop. And the only way to stop them is if I like talk out loud to kind of like drown out or stop the video from replaying or stop the thoughts. So I don't know if this is what everybody else goes through. I don't feel like it's really an inner monologue. It's more like replaying of old things or concepts. I don't even know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it brings us back to like a point I mentioned earlier. Usually people who don't have an inner monologue, the time where it actually comes up the most is during negativity. So it's like, yeah, they might have like portions of it, but if you lack an inner monologue extremely, you have to kind of say it out loud to make the thought the most real, in the sense that like you can't hear it in your mind. So you might want to like clarify that there's something going on in your brain. So if you have to, you would have to voice it. But it's kind of like, yeah, there's something there happening still, even though you don't have like an anxious thoughts per se or verbal thoughts per se, you still feel the anxiety. It's there. You mentioned this element of pattern breaking. So when you notice your mother's comments, breaking the pattern in whatever way actually helps you get out of that thought. And my dog just barked, and maybe it's like Wendy's so good with animals that my animals are like noticing her presence.
Whoa.
And they're like, wow, I want to be a part of this conversation. So like Wendy's like an animal whisperer. She's just so fantastic with all animals.
I want those powers.
Dr. Doolittle, no? Was it like another fictitious character?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I find it interesting what Wendy said, because this makes me, and I might ask you, Joyce, because for me, the inner monologue is necessary to have sort of a continuity or direction in time. If I only have images, I can be comfortable in the moment, but there is no progression from A to B. It's almost like, I mean, this is a bit of a jump. People say frontal or prefrontal cortex is the one that plans and does things. For me, it's probably requires language to articulate it and push me through time. So I'm kind of amazed. For example, Joyce, you get a lot of shit done, but you said you don't have an internal monologue. How does that work? Because for me, a perception of me flowing through time is tied to the articulation. So I'm curious how that works for you and or Wendy.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I have a theory that I think NI users who have an internal monologue can be more chatty. So I've met INFJs who can talk more. Like they're actually quite articulate, and there's a lot of thoughts. And my hypothesis is that they actually have an internal monologue, whereas I'm both an NI user and I don't have an internal monologue, so I'm double succinct. But not all NI users are like this. So like for me, the conclusion of the thought already appears. So I actually have an idea of where it's headed, or what my end thought is of all thoughts. Like, so it's like it appears to me, and I don't have to go through the process of verbalizing it or think, or like I don't even sometimes have to go through the process of fully thinking it through too. Like I just know the end before I begin the idea. And I realize that like ENFPs find that to be like witchcraft, because they have NE, and if they have an internal monologue too, they're like they double have to like think through all their thoughts, or like actually one by one go through all their thoughts before they actually realize the conclusion of what they think. Whereas like I'm like the complete opposite, as in like I have an idea of the end before it begins.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel, and it's a great power, but I rely on TI wrangling my way along a chosen path to know all the steps in between. But it may also have sort of a risk, because what if you're wrong, right? So for me, it's that I can haggle my way from A to B to C to D, I think NE throws out like all these streamers of potential neurons or things that can connect. And then TI just jumps and picks a narrow set of paths to travel along a certain nerve fiber. That's my analogy. So if I didn't have that, I would have a hard time trusting the end. I mean, obviously you do, but I think there's a bit of risk. If you're good at it, you're a god. If you're not, you could have really wrong assumptions, and there's nothing to hold back. For me, it's TI. I don't know how Shiv, I mean, he uses TE. I think he might be a little similar to you because you both have NI, but I'm just curious how that works because he's a different flavor, right?
Yeah, it is actually similar to Joyce. Like for you, you have a bunch of options that you said you need to filter and funnel through. For me, it's like I see a lot of options and my mind instantly goes, okay, what's the option that I want? Or what's the end that I want? And once that comes into my head, I can just start in my head thinking about, okay, this is how we're going to get to that. Or is it worth getting to it? Or what and how. That all keeps forming up. Occasionally I do have these things of I don't exactly know what to target. And that usually happens when different parts of my brain are saying different things. And I actually experienced it a few days ago. It was, should I go out of the house? Should I not go out? Because if I go, I'm going to try something. If I don't, it's actually not a good time to be trying something. And I went, and turns out it was not a good time to try it. So it's not always on point. And like you said, if it's right, you're a god. If not, it's a bad decision. It is something that I would say it's a skill that I'm still learning to understand and know when to use and when not to use, but it is there, and it does try to eventually just get to one specific decision very early on. It's not always the right one, but there is always very quickly a definite end in sight. And I think it might not always make me correct. It has been most of the time, thankfully. It does make me very decisive, and I think in most cases that's a skill that has proven very useful in my life.
Now I'm kind of wondering, do those of you with inner monologues, do you feel like you have to talk through things to get to some place, or have to have that monologue somehow?
Yeah, Joseph is hard nodding, so I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of any decision that I make that doesn't have result in some kind of argument in my head. Like yeah, I'm wondering how you would make this, how people can make decisions without that. Maybe either it's impossible or it's way more decisive. I'm not sure. Maybe it is better. But I find for me, it's often like I'm trying to my brain is trying to like handhold the other parts of my brain and tell them like, okay, well, we want this, but we need this, and these are the options. This is what's going to happen, and then okay, how are these decisions going to impact your future? And sometimes they're about things that really I don't need to make such a big decision. Like I'm out. I need to grab a bite to eat. What am I going to eat? And then I'm like, okay, well, let's weigh the pros and cons here. Let's see. And it's a whole, and the process takes like 5 minutes when I could just be like, yeah, I'm feeling on this, and then do it. But I wonder. That's actually. I want to know like how I'm trying. Maybe that's not the right example, but I'm trying to think of like a really basic decision that you make every day that is so simple yet takes a long time for most people. And I wonder how each person here deals with that in their head.
Deciding what to eat?
Yeah, okay. I think that's a good example. Okay, you're out. What do you eat? You're not feeling anything in particular, but you're hungry.
So if it's for me, deciding what to eat takes such a long time that sometimes I just don't eat. And don't recommend that. But when deciding, and I talked to Joyce a little bit about this, like let's say I'm at a restaurant, or let's say deciding on where to eat. I don't really talk through it or I just imagine like restaurants are close by, or I look at maps. So it's like I need a little bit of help from the external world a little bit. I look at what's around, and I look at the restaurants, and I imagine them in my head. I imagine I assess distance. I assess the food options, like the food options appear in my head as images. And if I don't know what they have, I have to look at images to know what they have. And I look at the price. It's all very like concrete, I guess, when deciding. And then when I think of the images, I listen to my feeling about it. Like I think it's kind of like a carousel of images. So I think of an image, I look at my feeling of how I feel about that food, and then I switch to the next, and I feel it out, and I switch to the next, and then it singles down from there. I don't really go, okay, what do I eat? What do I eat? That takes a lot of effort for me to do. So I don't even think about that in my head. Like, what do I eat? I just go straight to images, prices, distances, how long it would get there. And I started to learn to look at closing times now because I've had many times where I've gone and it's closed. So that's been troublesome. But it's kind of a boring way. I don't really have thoughts about it. Maybe there's something I'm missing. I'm curious to hear how you guys think about it.
Yeah, so Wendy's bringing to life the element of if you don't have an internal monologue, there might be a more kinesthetic element. So because she has ISFP preferences, she's going to feel out the foods rather than think out the foods and thoughts. And so how does everyone experience picking food? Shiv and Boris?
It's actually a very mathematical way for me. So I'm guessing we're talking on a daily basis and not like special occasions or something. So
Daily basis, yeah.
okay, so I have a meal kit service, so I have like a bunch of pre-cooked meals sitting in my fridge. So for me, it's how many calories have I consumed today? How many do I have left? Okay, what's at the top of my shelf? Pick that up and eat it, because I find that it takes me like 5 minutes on average to eat my lunch or dinner if it's just an everyday meal. And so I don't spend too much time thinking about it. It's like, okay, I already know when I was placing the order a week in advance that this is something that I do like to eat. So no matter what I pick up, it's going to be something that I like and is within my calorie restrictions and everything. And that's it. It's like, it's at the top, pick it up, eat it, done. On occasions where I don't have something in the fridge or like I ran out of food, whatever, I usually think, well, do I have enough time to go out and eat or not? If I do, I'll look up some restaurants in my to be explored list and think of how much money I have left for my monthly budget and accordingly try out the priciest place on the list if I have the room. If I don't, I would rather order at home. So I would open up DoorDash, see what the offers are, where I'm getting a best balance between taste and quantity and everything, and what's quick if I'm super hungry, and just order that. So it's almost never taken me too long. The one occasion where I do get stuck up is, okay, I have a friend coming over. And so for me, it's just a very mathematical decision. But when I have a friend coming over, I ask them, and not a lot of my friends live in the area I'm in, so they're not super familiar. And so at that point, it becomes something that I have to like, but they also have to like. And for me, it's a very like a mathematical way of telling what I want, but for them, there's no such framework. It's more emotional or preference based. And so I really have to ask them, do you want this? Do you want that? Okay, we are going here, but last call, do you want that or something? And just like keep double checking with them if what we have decided on a hunch is actually something they are excited about. And I've noticed that some people don't actually care. It's like as long as we're going out and eating something, they're fine.
Yeah, and you'll see here that the EJs, so for example, ENTJs and ENFJs can make decisions really fast. They're known as expedient decision makers. Whereas with IP types, so ISFPs and INFPs, can potentially take the longest to make a decision. I'm wondering where Boris lands with all
Yeah, I
that.
don't fit. for me is I'm actually something which you could call an accidental faster, because like I'm not too attached to food, but the decision is not difficult. I normally have sort of pre-canned options. I always like to, whatever I do, I know NE can't span everything, but I'm normally aware of a bunch of options. I always have something at home that I could eat should I feel hungry, and should I feel, yeah, I can do this, even though I have a crazy deadline, I'm going to wolf this down. But it's sort of a very, very easy decision. I have sort of pre-filled bases, and there's not too much emotionality. Sometimes I might say, actually, I kind of feel like that, but mostly it's three good options. Which one do I pick? It's pseudo random, or it might be a slight preference, but it's really a very easy decision, as is not eating at all. I'm like, nah, I'm not hungry right now. So it is really a non-issue, and I'm cool with this or that. I'm not particularly attached to a particular meal plan, right?
I'm actually starting to think this question is not a good question for you guys who have very quick decision-making skills or have a system. So this is not a good decision. This is not a good question to look at the thoughts that you go through, because it's already decided, or you're just very quick. Whereas me, Joseph, and are just very slow at it. How about you, Joyce?
Oh, you guys are so sweet, turning it back on me.
Take that.
I don't think I take too long to decide on what to eat. I'm just like, yes, this seems good. I'll eat it. I'm an Enneagram 9, so it's more of I'm okay with a lot of things in general. So I'm not that fussy. I'm a peacemaker in that sense in terms of food. Whereas like it seems like, so Wendy and Joseph, they're both ISFP and INFP, so they're FI dominants, and they're also Enneagram 4s as well. So there is like this element of heavy personal attachment for a lot of things. It's like a lot of things are almost a Shakespearean, to be or not to be, that is the question. And so because it's a big decision, everything feels a little weighty. And so there is a bit of, is this decision symbolic of what I feel like, or who I want to be, or where I want to go? So there's those large questions there. I'm inferring that you might experience it that way. Always feel free to correct me.
This is what I love about type, is that I just never knew that other people made different decisions about food. I thought people went by feelings.
I'm emotionally attached to burgers. There's actually stories with it. Like, I know if someone asks me what your favorite food is, I will immediately say burger, because to me it's more than food. Like, it has been almost single-handedly responsible for some of my most important achievements as a child or as an adult. Like, every time I have done something good in my life, a burger has been eaten within 24 hours of that event.
He measures the exact time frame.
Yeah, it's now like, I want to try that for my own life. I'm so chaotic. I need that.
Yeah, I think you need like a morale boosting meal in your life, because every time I'm facing something, it's like, oh, I'm going to war or something. I'm not actually going to war. I'm just giving an example. It's like, okay, now that I've had my double cheeseburger without tomato, I'm definitely going to win the war or something like that. So
well, I think you need the tomato. What if the tomato is important for that battle?
No tomato is ever too important for a battle, even for a food fight.
See the witty back and forth that people with internal dialogue have. Just happened right now.
There's a couple of tangents, and I have to see which ones I pursue. One is there's also kind of a counterpart. It's the ability to internally visualize stuff, and to maybe, I wonder if there is, I believe I have both. I do have both. I think very visually, but I wonder if there's a tendency, if you're not very verbal, you're more likely to be able to visualize. And there's also people, like I recall one INTP in our group, and they shocked me when they said, like, they're INTP, they have like a computer science background, and they told me, I have zero visual ability to visualize something. When they say I'm visualizing an orange, to them it's like a concept. They don't see an orange, but they have amazing memory, and for them it's all in a loop. Like, it's a very different way of achieving the same thing I do. And I'm baffled that when they close their eyes, they can't see anything, don't imagine anything. Or I wonder what happens when they read a book. Like, and I wonder if they're correlated. I could see possibly if you're not very internally verbal, you might be more likely to be visual / conceptual, which might have a visual component. Just throwing it out there. I'm very visual. I see things like I remember stuff based on where it is on my desk. And when I write notes, I literally go to the page and I know it was on yellow paper and was on the top right corner. I can almost see my scribble. But I'm just curious how that fits into the verbal versus visual. Maybe there's a correlation.
I'm going to poke at Joseph because he hasn't talked in a while.
Oh, okay. So the question was, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty good at both, actually. I do find sometimes my visual imagination is lacking at times, and I don't know if that's unique to me or if that's just that there's limits, like most people. Some people, I guess that there are people who can like visualize things incredibly intensely in their head, where they can draw it, or they have like photographic memory or something. So those are things I can't relate to. When I see things in my head, they're foggy. It's a foggy image, and I can zoom in on parts. But for me, it's always been a challenge as an artist to try and take, okay, what's kind of going on in my brain, and how can I make this into a real thing that exists in the world? And I find there's a lot of I'm kind of turning the thing around in my head to try and figure out, okay, what does this actually look like? Because I have, it's just an impression in my head. How do I make this into something solid and real? And then through drawing, sometimes I can go back and forth and be like, okay, this idea, so I'm going to do this. And then I find that what I saw on the page is kind of a mix of both those things going back and forth. And then that informs what I see in my head. Did that answer the question? I'm trying to remember what
it gave us your opinion. So I feel I can walk in both camps, but my hunch would have been if somebody is very nonverbal and doesn't talk to themselves, which you're not, they might be more likely to be visual, but I could be wrong. It's a statistical statement.
It could be. I mean, like I said, I am a visual artist, so yeah. I do, or I'm not doing a whole lot these days, but like that was a career path for me at one point. So I do. That was that's important. You have to be able to see in your mind, I think, generally, unless you're drawing exclusively from life. But there's always some interpretation. So there is that. But yeah, that hasn't stopped me from being very verbal in my mind.
Yeah, and so there's a quite interesting dynamic here because you both actually have quite a visual life, like both you, Boris, and Joseph, and you guys both have an internal monologue. You guys both actually do art. And Boris has a very like ENTP way of drawing, actually. Like he's actually a very good artist, but the way that he draws is not art, is how he, puts it. I actually think you have a story there that would be quite interesting to share, because I'm interested in how other people approach art with their dialogue too. Because like the way that you draw, Boris, is you're very logical in how you draw even, and I just think it's hilarious.
Oh, this is going back to a story. I mean, in high school I felt like a fake. I had an A in art all the time, but I would just make something up, a concept. But for me, I felt like every time I draw something, it's like I have clay lumps as hands. I see something in my mind and then I try to put it on paper, and my art teacher might like it, but it's not what I saw. So I feel I lack in executing what's in my mind. So yeah, I'm just I feel almost like hampered. There's things I see I can never get to paper, right? But I mean, conceptually, I can come up with stuff. It just disappoints me. And I remember one time we had to draw something in a pointillistic scheme. You probably know what pointillism is. And I drew something. It was very exact, and my math teacher said, "Boris, that's not art. That's an architecture drawing." And I had a probably ENFP friend of mine. She was and her stuff didn't align, but it was art because it had that feeling expression. So I feel like I'm hampered. I'm defective. I cannot express what I feel. So I doodle, but it always falls short of what I see. So thanks for the compliment, but I think there's way better artists out there.
Now I want to see everyone's art and see how it applies to cognitive functions and everything.
Yeah, like the TI artists you'll see in museums, like they're artistic drawings that have no emotion ascribed to it. So like you'll see that rebel who just creates lines, and they're like, oh yeah, there's a logical explanation for how these colors go together and how they influence the other colors. But I felt nothing while creating this. But it's in a museum now, so.
I did something similar. I might have mentioned that to you. It was something about progression, and I had sort of this. It was a hexagonal structure where in the middle there were like little cardboard things that stuck up that became longer as you went further out, and there was sort of a color dynamics that followed the rainbow colors in the prism. So I could have a story about it, but I don't think it was art. It wasn't the there it is, wow, that speaks to me. It was like constructed, right? So I thought it's inferior to what my friend was able to draw, even though her point perspective totally didn't align. But
I'm curious about how you experience art, Wendy. It's kind of interesting. I don't know actually if you're an artist or not, but I do know like in the way that you convey yourself, like you have like a beautiful makeup style and it's
Oh man.
it's very artistic. You're like,
you.
oh no, she's drawing attention to me now. Sorry.
I know. I do actually do art. I don't really have a portfolio or anything. I don't have formal education. I don't think I'm that good at art. I just copy what I see. I'm a lot better with portraits. I think the human face is very interesting. But with what Boris was saying, like I'm a very visual person. I also don't have an inner monologue. It just is. And it's similar. I do draw, and maybe I'll show you some things, Joyce. It's just very rudimentary. I don't think it has emotion to it, like what Boris was saying, but it probably doesn't look like there's like a logic to it. I don't know how to explain. I don't think I have formal education.
Can I say something to that? I think I do appreciate art. I do. When I see real art, as I would say that I might see in my head and can't create, I admire it and I appreciate it. Like, for example, there's like, I like Blade Runner themes. Sometimes you see these drawings that create worlds and I can almost slide into them. So I have an appreciation for it, but I cannot create it, which is really frustrating because I have these clay lumps as hands. I don't have fingers, right? But I do appreciate art, right? It'd be curious to see, because I find people that have what you probably have, they can create something that I'm jealous of, and it might be totally misaligned. So if you want to share something, that would be awesome. Do you have something that you can show us, or?
Maybe someday. I don't know where they are right now. I moved like 2 years ago, and I still haven't unpacked.
I wasn't sure, just for the context of this.
But I do want to make a comment to something I think, Boris, you mentioned before about, or something, or maybe it was Joseph, about how can you reach a goal without like a monologue or some kind of connection. And I don't feel like I have that connection. Unlike Joyce, I don't just visualize like an outcome and then go towards it. I just have a jumble of thoughts. I feel like mine's very chaotic, and in order to like plan and get things done, I have to draw out a flow chart so I can see it, or sometimes talking it out can help, but talking doesn't really translate as well to action for me. So I need to draw it out. I like to communicate through pictures as well. And it's something that I was very good at in my last job, where if I'm having communication issues with a customer I'm working with, then I turn to drawing things on napkins. Like if we speak different languages, then I'm just like, okay, I'll just draw it out for you, and then we'll communicate through that way. But I don't really think out loud through my thoughts. I know some people do. I find it really hard for me to do, and I've tried it. Like, okay, Wendy, focus. Okay, Wendy, focus. What I do, and then it would just be blank. I have to draw it out somewhere, or write it down.
I also wonder if inner monologue is a bit cultural as well. If Asian females are less likely to have an inner monologue because we grow up in very non-talkative families. So like a lot of Asian households, they only communicate to insult each other. Otherwise, they don't really talk to each other. And so you just grow up with mutism or like by accident. And so you just end up not talking to yourself because of that.
I actually wonder about that too. It might be that cultural difference as well.
Interesting.
All right, cool. So any final thoughts on this topic before we close off?
Close off?
I
Shiv,
did.
what's your outlook on art? Oh, sorry, I was trying to tease you.
Yeah, I was getting to that. So when we say art, are we talking specifically like paintings and drawings, or can we also loop in like photography and stuff into it?
I'd
Whatever
say
you
loop it all in.
Okay, so paintings, like they aesthetically look nice sometimes. Like I can look at a painting and think it looks nice, or maybe it doesn't, but I don't feel too much of a connection to it. But when I'm out in the world and just like looking at things, I might want to take pictures of things. So a good picture, like I look at some scenery or some buildings together, and then I will automatically get an imagination of, oh, if I look at it from this angle and with this color palette, it would make a nice picture. And then I would whip out my phone and try to recreate that picture on my phone. But like even if I get a good picture, I try to think of an aesthetic going along with it. So I like collecting posters to put up in my place, but it like a picture conveys 1,000 words, and I try to look for what the picture kind of means and what the whole aesthetic is about. So I put up like a distributed poster of New York City's like skyline in my room, and it looks nice to me because it makes me think of what my future goals are and what my aspirations are and stuff, or the kind of environment I want to be in. And because it's a city, it reminds me of industriousness and nightlife and energy and stuff like that. Similarly, when I put up some other stuff like Star Wars or a poster or something like that, or even just a random selection of colors, like everything in my life, my possessions, clothes, desk accessories, everything is one of 4 colors, and I try to apply that aesthetic sense. I'm not going to call it art to everything because it has a certain meaning to me. You can apply it to fashion, you can apply it to aesthetics, you can apply it to something as simple as my phone wallpaper, but it has to have a meaning for me, which it's an emotional meaning. So if I get that kind of sensation from something, I feel good. But while I cannot recreate it in form of conventional art, I did find a way to use my own skills, whether they be smartphone photography or editing or just curating something or just getting other people to curate it for me sometimes, to create an artistic sense in my life, which then impacts my well-being positively.
Yeah, it's like it almost helps with reinforcing a sense of identity of the kind of person you want to be in the future, an aesthetic you generally want to embody in a sense.
Yeah, like actually, I just noticed my t-shirt right now is 3 of the 4 colors I prefer. It's a little dark on camera, but it's red, white, black, and blue. Actually, all 4 of them, and each of those 4 colors has a meaning for
Sounds like
for
you
me.
got beaten up, red, light, room.
Hey, it could mean beating other people up. You never know, but no,
That's
not
true.
violent.
Going to
Zebra.
war.
Yeah. So red to me has always meant like
Action.
energy and passion, and black is timeless, it's classy, it's mysterious. White is calm and peaceful and approaching, and blue is a very optimistic, like it's a color associated with optimism and technology and like cybernetic futures and stuff. So usually go for these 4 colors in almost everything. Like you can open my cupboard and or my book chest or anything and find exactly these 4 colors.
What's wrong
Yeah.
with green?
Nothing. In fact, I am trying to incorporate green, but it's actually, as a kid, green used to be my favorite color. Then cooked spinach happened, and that was traumatizing. So green, I'm slowly healing, and green is making its way back in the form of fake plants.
Yeah, I love how intentional Shiv is with every area of his life, especially if it has to do with an expression of personal identity. Oh, and when do you
I
want to
do
just...
have to say, from Shiv's background, that was something I noticed immediately, how there were the main colors in there. I was gonna comment on that when he got into, oh, I decorate according to these colors. I think I know what they are.
I love how the ISFP is the first person to notice your color aesthetic palette and how you're intentional with that. So,
And Joseph is the expert. I mean, he's an interior designer. He knows how to like.
You
How's
have
that
a
for you,
contract heading your way.
Joseph? Do you find when you create something which is artistic or a sketch, do you feel you were able to express what you saw, or do you feel like Boris clay hands, or is it somewhere in between? I'm just curious because you're very artistic, right?
Oh, I really struggle. I always find it always falls short of what I had in my head. That's the perfectionism that comes with it. And also, it's funny, you found your color scheme. I'm in my place right now. You can see the walls are white behind me. It's because I just stuck with that because I couldn't decide what to do. I've been like agonizing. I have a few different color palettes that I've been going over the last couple of years. Like one is like kind of more like based on like kind of different eggshells. The other one was like, okay, I'm going to keep it white and then have like one really like bold color. And then I go through millions of ideas in my head, and the end result is I don't know what I'm doing. So that's probably a good insight into my creative mind and its lack of functionality as a creative mind. I mean, it's very creative. I can think of a million things, but I can't decide on what to do. So my creative output is stifled because of that. So I'm actually very envious of you, Shiv, and your like decisiveness. You have a system for what you do, and for me, it's like, well, I don't whatever feels right. Which, you know what, nothing ever feels quite right. Everything feels a little off, and I'm just constantly trying to shuffle things around until things start to make sense.
I feel the same.
all right, cool. And on that note, we'll wrap up today's internal monologue panel. If you guys want to see more of this, feel free to comment below and say, we want more internal monologue. And we can either bring on the same group of guests with a different internal monologue discussion and also different guests to explain how they experienced an internal monologue and keep this discussion going. And also feel free to write in the comments your experience with your internal monologue. What is your personality type and how do you experience it? And so thank you everyone for coming out today. It's cool to see how stylized Shiv is. Everything is intentionally crafted. He even has a necklace to symbolize the kind of identity that he wants to carry forward as well too. And so he keeps the fuel that burns his passion. So
White, blue, red, and is there black in there? Probably on the edges.
On the other side, yeah.
Gotcha.
he's very consistent with his
Is
color
that
theme.
Captain America?
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm more of an Iron Man fan, but Captain America doesn't give up, so I like that.
Okay.
I even know INTJs too who like to keep with a color scheme to keep their brand on point. And so it just reminds me a lot of Shiv's ENTJ color scheme cohesiveness right there. So yeah. And I also like Boris's cheekiness during panels. He always knows how to tease people or to challenge them, poke them. So Boris gets a PhD in poking the bear. He just loves to find a way to like mischievous find holes in what you're saying or ways that he could poke at you in a friendly way. He's not a mean poker. He's a curious poker who wants to feel engaged with you through poking. Joseph, thanks for making your way to this panel today.
Yes, thank you. By the way, if I've been messing with my hair, it's because it's just been cut and not properly. So I'm learning in real time. Like, oh, this is what it looks like on screen. Oh God, what do I do with this? So yes, thank you for having me on.
There'll be a lot of ladies in the comments. I love that guy's hair. Can we have him on again?
Well, hopefully it'll be cleaned up by next time. But yes,
it'll look different because he can't decide on what haircut he wants to portray to the audience. So it'll be in the mood of how he feels that certain
He's
day.
like a handsome Justin Bieber, right? I mean, there's a slight similarity. Uh-oh. Starting controversial here.
Yeah.
Do you see a similarity? Maybe a little bit, maybe not.
Boris loves his INFPs, so he just had to give the compliments to Joseph. He's like, you know what?
That's right. He deserves them all.
Very handsome.
And suggestion for a future show. I mean, you could do something about the visualization, which is sort of a counterpart, right? This is about inner monologue. The other one is about do you have a visual representation when you close your eyes? Because it's sort of analogous. It's a maybe. I'm just throwing it out there, right? So.
Yeah, totally. When I gather enough people to do that. But I guess I could ask anyone for that. So yeah, coming up, Boris's suggestions. And thanks, Wendy, for inspiring all of this. And so, yeah, it was a brilliant topic and it had a lot of good discussion around it.
Is that why she got the trophy there behind her? What? That must be an art trophy.
That's my partner's golf trophy, not mine.
Oh.
Actually, this decoration, not me.
Yeah, and I find like Wendy's super humble, so it's nice to have her humble presence here. I'll see everyone in the next episode. Take care.
Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.